Hey y'all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell, and this is the Finally Fall book tag. My mom made me this adorable little crocheted pumpkin, and it's the only decoration that we have in our van, so I love it so much I'm just gonna hold it as my prop for the video. I don't know who the original creator of this tag was. I saw it on Literature Science Alliance, and I will link her video down below. For this video, I'm only going to choose books that fit the prompts that I have read in this calendar year. So, with that being said, the first question is, in the fall, the air is crisp and clean. Name a book with a vivid setting. Two come to mind for this. The first one is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is a book about a magical library, and it has all the magical library vibes that you could possibly want. It's about a young boy that grows up in the library who's never known a life outside of it. He doesn't know how to get out of the library, and he spends most of his childhood trying to find a way to get out. The other perspective in the story is a young girl who lives out in the dust, in the wilds of civilization, and her village is attacked and she is captured right at the beginning of the story. And so it's about these two children and how their lives interweave. But the library setting is so cool and infinite, and it just has so many little mysteries and sensations, and it's perfect for the fall when you just want to curl up with a book. My other recommendation for this prompt is one I just finished reading yesterday, and that is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This is a book about a slow vampire takeover of an entire town. It starts off really slow and you're getting to know everyone in the town, and it's so vivid because the town is like the setting, the plot, and the character all in one. It's so incredible. It's really like a case study in how to do a story about an entire city. But it's about all these various people that live in the town and their whole town's descent into hell as vampires move in and take over. It's very creepy, it's very spooky, it's perfect for fall. Number 2 says, nature is beautiful but also dying. Name a book that is beautifully written but also covers a heavy topic like loss or grief. The first one that came to mind for this is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a memoir by the woman who was the Jane Doe victim in the Brock Turner rape trial. It is her story, her account of what happened from the event through the trial, and all of the news stories and the coverage and the backlash and legislation and everything that spun out of that case, which happened right around the time of Me Too as well, and was part of the reason that that movement was spurred. So she is such a beautiful person and a beautiful writer, and she really just shares this really raw, horrible, traumatizing experience in such a magnetic way. It's something that I think every person in the United States at least should read because it's just so enlightening. And the second one that comes to mind for this prompt is The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. This is a really beautifully written story about a true event, but it's a historical fiction book, and it's about the siege of Masada, which was basically when the Romans were casting out and slaughtering basically all of the Jews in Rome. And so the Jews were chased out of Jerusalem and they retreated to this place called Masada, which was like this desert fortress, and they survived there as long as they could until the Romans finally came for them. And then the entire fortress of Masada, which was like 900 to 1,000 people, killed themselves in order to prevent the Romans killing them. Really horrific true event that happened, but it's beautifully written. It's from the perspective of 4 different women who lived in this fortress, and the 4 women were the dove keepers, who they kept all the doves that fertilized the crops that they tried to grow at the fortress. It's really heart-wrenching. I cried at the end. There are 5 people survived, 2 women and 4 children. And so reading it, I wasn't sure until the very end who were going to be the ones that actually made it to the end of the book. And it was so haunting, and is definitely going to stay with me for a really long time. Number 3 says, fall is back to school season. Share a nonfiction book that taught you something new. I haven't read too many nonfiction books this year, but one that comes to mind is Cultish by Amanda Montell. This is a book about the language used by cults and how culty things use similar language to make a group mentality and us versus them mentality that makes them feel like a connected group of people. And it has lots of different chapters that it goes through, and it kind of starts with like the top tier, what people think of when they think of a cult, which is like a suicide cult, you know, like the really extremist. And then it, you know, it goes down through all these different layers of anything that we call a cult, like CrossFit and MLMs and things like that. So really, really intriguing and quick read. The other one that comes to mind for this one is Story Genius by Lisa Cron. It's about writing and about how to structure your stories so that character is at the focus instead of plot, and how the character should drive the plot and not the other way around. It was a little too prescriptive for my taste, but I did learn some things from it I am trying to employ in my own writing, so it was definitely one that I would recommend. Number 4 says, in order to keep warm, it's good to spend time with the people we love. Name a fictional family, household, or friend group that you'd like to be a part of. This was a really challenging one for me because I have read a lot of really dark stuff this year, but the one that came to mind for me was the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. So this is the series that starts with A Natural History of Dragons. I technically read the 5 books in that series last year, but this year I read the standalone book that follows that series. It's set in the same world, but instead of having Lady Trent as the protagonist, it has her granddaughter. So Lady Trent's name is Isabella Camhurst, and I just absolutely love the Camhurst family. They are all scholars, and they go on these amazing expeditions, and they solve mysteries. A Natural History of Dragons, the first 5 books, is all about studying dragons. And then the following book, Turning Darkness into Light, which is the one that I read this year, her granddaughter is an archaeologist basically and studies an ancient dragon civilization and their language. So I love people who are dedicated to scholarly pursuits, but also adventure and not afraid to like let roadblocks stand in their way. They're very tenacious people. They're also, it's set in kind of like a Victorian era setting. And so the women in the family are kind of upending a lot of traditions for women who aren't supposed to be, you know, brave adventurers and scholars and things like that. So I think they're just really admirable people and would totally love if Lady Trent was my grandma. Okay, number 5 is The Colorful Leaves Are Piling Up on the Ground. Show us a pile of fall-colored spines. I live in a van. I don't have a lot of books with me. So instead of this, I'm just going to share, I think, the book that I read this year that has the most fall vibe sort of cover. And for that, the answer is The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. This is a really sweet, really sad story about a cat and its owner who are going on a cross-country road trip because the owner is trying to find a new home for the cat. He can no longer take care of it. And it's all from the cat's perspective for the most part. It just has a lot of interesting perspective on life and finding meaning and family with those that you love, and the links we'll go to take care of the people who mean the most to us. Number 6 is Fall is the Perfect Time for Some Storytelling by the Fireside. Share a book where someone is telling a story. 2 of these come to mind that I've read this year, and they're both very similar. I talked about this in a previous video, but the first one is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is about a Hollywood actress in like the 1950s, I think. She's kind of like a Marilyn Monroe-esque figure. She's like the ultimate bombshell starlet, and it's about her life and her relationships and how she sort of manipulates men along the way in order to further her career. The story is told when she is an old woman. She is telling her whole, she's doing like a tell-all to a young reporter and finally like sharing her story. It's a fantastic book and really took me by surprise because it's not normally the thing that I would go for. And the second book along the similar veins is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is another historical fiction. It's set in the 1940s, and it's about a young woman who drops out of college and her parents are sending her to live with her aunt in New York City, who runs like a rundown vaudevillian Broadway theater. And she ends up becoming a seamstress for all the showgirls, and just about like the things that she learns as a young person, the mistakes that she makes that define the rest of her life. And this story is told again as she's an older woman now, and she is like writing a letter explaining her life to a younger woman. Also thought this one was really, really beautifully written. Number 7 is The Nights Are Getting Darker, Share a Dark, Creepy Read. So the first one I think of for this is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I absolutely loved this when I read it earlier this year. It is a very short novella. It is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. So I could just recommend that by Edgar Allan Poe, but that would only take you like a half an hour to read. It's not really even a book. It's more like a epic poem of sorts. But What Moves the Dead takes the story of the fall of the House of Usher. It follows it very closely, but it puts a unique spin on it that I really, really loved. And it's about this person gets a letter from their childhood friend asking them to come visit because their sister is really ill. And when they show up, the house is falling apart. It looks like the house is like falling into the pond. It's really creepy. It's full of fungus. The sister's illness is like really hard to explain, and things are just not what they seem. So really good, creepy vibes, very easy short read. And my second recommendation for this one is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I just read it earlier this month and really had a good time with it. Sexism of all classics kind of put aside, I thought this was really, really cool to see kind of the origin of where all these vampire stories come from and the way our culture has it interpreted over time. I didn't realize really how gruesome and gritty and real it would feel, even though it was written, you know, way back in the 1800s. So I thought Dracula was a super duper fun read, and obviously it's perfect for October. Number 8 is The Days Are Getting Colder. Name a short, heartwarming read that could warm up someone's cold and rainy day. I don't normally read a lot of heartwarming stories, so I had to like go through my Goodreads list to figure this one out when I'm looking back at all the books I'd read this year. But I think 2 fall into this category, and the first and most obvious one is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The Midnight Library is about a woman that right in the first chapter, I think she tries to commit suicide. And when she wakes up, she is in the Midnight Library. And it's this mysterious place where every book that she picks up is a different life that she could have lived if she had made different choices along the way. I think I read this book in a day. It's maybe like 300 pages. It's a super quick read. It makes you feel good because it's about reflecting on your life and the decisions that you make and how different perspective can really change the way you see the events that have happened, and how just because you think something could have turned out better doesn't mean that the better situation would have actually made you happier. So that's a really easy recommend. The other one that is short and sweet is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. It's also a very short, it's sci-fi. It is about a far future, 2 different factions on different sides of a time travel war, and these 2 soldiers on either side that start leaving letters to each other. And at first they're taunting each other about their victories, and then over the course of the story they start to see the humanity in the other side and in each other and fall in love. So it's really about like the hard decisions that they have to make about what that means for this war that they've dedicated their life to, and whether that's more important to them than the person that they love. And number 9 is Fall Returns Every Year. Name an old favorite that you'd like to return to soon. I haven't been in the habit of rereading the last couple of years since I started my booktube channel, but one that has come up a couple times recently that I've thought about is Cashil's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. I believe there's actually 9 books in this world. There's like 3 different trilogies. I read the first 2 trilogies and they were fantastic. It's a epic high fantasy story where the magic system is sort of based around sex and pleasure, and there are different gods that have influence over this world, and it follows this one young woman who is blessed or cursed with the Cashil's Dart, which is this specific skill set that she has that not very many people do. It's spicy, but in a really classy and elegant sort of way. So if that sounds intriguing to you, definitely pick it up, because I definitely don't hear enough people talking about that series. It gets better and better as it goes along. The first book I remember being a little slow and the world building takes a while, but then once the story really gets going, the main character is sort of becomes like a spy in high society, and the political machinations and intrigue that happen are just so complex and delightful along the way. So that's it for all of my It's Finally Fall book tag recommendations. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave the answers to some of these questions of your own down below, or just let me know what some of your favorite reads have been so far this fall, or what you're looking forward to reading next. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, be kind, read books, and hit the subscribe button below. I'll see you next time.